Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm reviewing the Puma Fuse 2.0. So 3 pros that I have with the Puma Fuse 2.0 is number 1, if you are on the market for a shoe that is decent for cross training, lifting, and that can kind of hold its own for CrossFit workouts, I think the Puma Fuse 2.0 is a good option to explore. So this model comes in at $100 USD. That is 50 less than something like the Tier CXT1 trainer, the Rad 1, the Hayes trainer. So a lot of the big name premium CrossFit models. So you will save a little bit of money with the shoe if you are on a budget. And overall, I thought it did a pretty good job for lifting and CrossFit style training. Puma has made a lot of updates to this shoe that make it a little bit better than the first Puma Fuse. So I do think this could be a viable option for my budget conscious shoppers out there. The second pro that I have with this model is that with those updates that I just mentioned, it seems like Puma was listening to the feedback that they received on the original Puma Fuse. The Puma Fuse model was a little bit polarizing with its fit, and its construction honestly wasn't the best when it comes to long-term durability. You had upper issues often with the shoe, especially for rope climbing. In the Puma Fuse 2.0, they removed like that plasticky synthetic layer here on the lateral side of the midfoot. So when rope climbing, I don't think you're gonna have breakdown up here with the upper nearly as much. Doing rope climbs in this felt fine. They reworked the material here on the midfoot on the lateral and medial side here, so this outsole wrap now has a new texture. They reworked the heel clip back here, and they reworked the upper in a means that I think is a little bit more simplistic, but also a little bit better when it comes to long-term durability. Now, I will say, for training, this shoe is great durability-wise, but do not wear them for pickleball. I wore this model for pickleball and drug my toe in one of my shots, and I scratched up the upper here. So if you're watching this Puma, having a little bit of an updated upper here, a synthetic layer, a little bit beefier, would be great for pickleball if you ever want to make a cross-training shoe that could be good for that context. The third thing to like about this model, and I mentioned this briefly in my second pro, is that the Puma Fuse 2.0 has an updated last construction. So essentially, the mold and size of this shoe fits a little bit different than the Puma Fuse 1.0. So with the Puma Fuse, something that a lot of folks experienced with the shoe was the midfoot was super narrow and the toe box felt super limiting in regard to width and the overall upper volume. In the Puma Fuse 2.0, it looks like it was widened a little bit through the midfoot, the forefoot's a little bit wider, and honestly, it feels like, despite still having a lower volume upper, a little bit more spacious, especially when you break these in. Now, when you first put these on, I would not be surprised if they feel a little bit snug, but after a couple of wears, this model has broken in really nicely. So I think the updated sizing will be a little bit more inclusive for different foot anatomies. So if the Puma Fuse 1.0 was a little bit snug for you and not to a huge degree, I think the Puma Fuse 2.0 will feel even better. Now granted, if you have wide feet, if you have flat feet, I don't think the Puma Fuse 2.0 will be the shoe for you. However, I do think there's a wider range of foot anatomies that this model will now work for. But that being said, let's talk about a couple of cons I have with the Puma Fuse 2.0. All right, so 2 cons that I have with the Puma Fuse 2 is number 1, as you get more niche with your training, whether it be like with heavier lifting or CrossFit, I do think this model will start to fall off a little bit. Now, it's a good training shoe for a little bit of everything for a fair price. However, something I noticed with this shoe, especially with like heavier barbell squats, is that with the insole construction in this model, this is what gives this model its responsiveness. So you have this thick foam insole, you will start to get compression. This is similar to the original Puma Fuse. So even when walking by squats with like 315 pounds, I was noticing this compress a little bit. Now, when actually squatting, it didn't really hinder performance. However, it was noticeable compared to other training shoes that are a little bit more stable and firm in nature. So that could be a limiter with this model when it comes to heavier lifting. And then for CrossFit, once again, like the shoe I think has a lot of updated features that will make it better for durability, but I am curious to see how this shoe fares for like a higher volume of folks using it over a longer duration when it comes to upper durability. I don't have any issues yet, but I do worry that with this lighter upper texture up here, especially the forefoot and midfoot, how long this will last. Honestly, Puma, if you're watching this, I would say if you increased the toe guard here and made the synthetic layer a little thicker, as mentioned with my pickleball part, I think this would make this shoe a lot more durable, and I think it would give your toe box a little bit more of like a rigid feeling and lock down that foot a bit better. The second con that I have with this shoe is that I already mentioned this as well, but if you do have a wide foot or a flatter foot and the Puma Fuse just did not fit for you at all, and it was almost like you were screaming in that model, I don't know if the updated sizing will work for you in the shoe still. So I think if that first model felt a little bit snug and you wanted a tiny bit more room, this shoe will fit. But if it was really snug on you and you almost felt like your feet was being constricted, I don't know if this is still going to be the model for you. So you may want to look into other training shoes that are a little bit more wide throughout, especially through the midfoot, because with the Puma Fuse 2.0, we do have a slightly more athletic fit here when it comes to the midfoot to the forefoot transition. Overall though, I'm pretty happy with the Puma Fuse 2.0. It seems like Puma was listening about the Puma Fuse first iteration and all the feedback that they received on it, the good and the bad, and it seems like they tried to rework enough of the things that bothered others with the Puma Fuse in the 2.0 to make it a stronger shoe. But now let's talk about this model's performance. So when it comes to the performance of the Puma Fuse 2.0, I'm going to break this section into a few different parts. I'm going to talk about lifting, versatile training, shorter runs, and then daily wear. In the context of lifting, honestly, I have been a fan of the Puma Fuse 2.0 for the most part. I think for more general strength workouts, this model will work really well. This Puma grip outsole grips the floor really well, so whether you're training on wooden platforms, rubber gym floors, or turf, you get a nice level of tread with the shoe, and it's overall very maneuverable. So if you do like a little bit more articulation with your training shoes, I think the Puma Fuse 2.0 will be a pretty good option for you. When cleaning, when doing lunges, etc., where you want a little bit more flex in the toe box, this model felt really good. Also, when working up to heavier deadlifts, like up to 455 pounds, when squatting over 3 plates, this model once again was okay. It doesn't do the best with stability because we do have that thicker foam insole, but I do think for more general strength work, this model should fit the bill really well. And if you like shoes that fit a little bit more athletic in nature for lifting sessions and you like that in your training shoes, this model should also fit the bill well for your needs. When it comes to versatile training, I like this shoe, and honestly, it has been one of my go-tos over the last few weeks when it comes to athletic style sessions because with that lower profile fit that this model has, it has like this athletic cleat-like feel and fit to it. I've really enjoyed it for multi-directional work, plyometrics, and even some sprint workouts. So this model I think will work in that context. So if you like to blend in box jumps, broad jumps, lateral jumps, and maybe some sprints in your normal training sessions, this model should do a pretty good job at that. Because this insole does have a bit more padding, you get a nice level of responsiveness with the shoe, but you also get a nice low profile rubber sole with this. So you get a nice level of ground feedback, I feel like, in this model as well for this training context. And across the board, I thought the breathability and lightweight nature of the shoe did a good job for versatile training. When it comes to shorter runs, this model is likely not going to be your best bet for longer or mid-range runs. I would say probably cap your runs to about 1 to 2 miles tops in this shoe, just because I could see comfort being an issue with this model for longer duration running. And honestly, I feel like you'll get more out of the shoe's durability if you only limit them for short runs. So if you want to tack on a warm-up or cool-down run that's like 1 to 2 miles, this shoe will work, and it's not going to be overly uncomfortable. Also, if you want to use this shoe for sprints, I could also see this model being a viable option for that context. I have enjoyed sprinting in the shoe, and we do have a little bit of a beveling of the heel here, so it's not unbearable to sprint in and break in and whatnot. When it comes to daily wear, I've liked this shoe for the most part, and that's for 2 key reasons. Number one, it's pretty dang comfortable if you wear it for like longer duration. So if you're standing on your feet all day, if you're walking, I find this model to be pretty comfortable due to that thicker foam insole. Also, it breathes really well. So I think if you have the foot anatomy that aligns with a shoe, it could be a very viable option if you want something for all day wear that you can kind of beat up and then wear to the gym, because at a price point of $100 USD, I don't really feel too bad about wearing these out and about and having them potentially break down faster. The second reason why I like this model for daily wear is that with this level of articulation, it just feels very natural on the foot. It doesn't feel super blocky or heavy, so I like that about this shoe for daily wear. And honestly, again, at that price point, I like that about this model because if I break them down on a daily wear basis, but I'm also training in them, I don't feel nearly as bad because I didn't sink like $150 into this shoe. So across the board, I like the Puma Fuse 2.0's performance. I know this model is pretty polarizing in nature. Not everybody's going to love it, but compared to the Puma Fuse, I think the 2.0 is a step in the right direction for the Puma Fuse cross-training shoe line. When it comes to the price of the Puma Fuse 2.0, you can expect to pay $100 USD. Now, this is up $10 USD compared to the Puma Fuse. I'm not super stoked on that change. However, since this model does perform better, like it doesn't bother me to that big of a degree. I think if they keep pushing that price point up, then we might have some problems, especially if they don't drastically change the shoe. But I could see this being a viable option price-wise if you don't want to drop like $150 on a Hayes trainer, a Rad 1, etc. So if you do want to save a little bit of money and you're much more casual with your CrossFit training and you want a shoe for a little bit of everything, I think the price point fits for the Puma Fuse 2.0. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should invest in the Puma Fuse 2.0? So I think if you're somebody who is very budget conscious with your training shoe selection and you do a little bit of everything on a weekly basis, I honestly think the Puma Fuse 2.0 could be a great option to explore. Now, I know not everybody loves the Puma Fuse training shoe line, but honestly, the 2.0 has been one of my favorite models over the last few months to train in. I feel like it does a really good job for like athletic style training sessions. So if you are somebody who likes to regularly blend lifting, sprinting, jumping, and then also some casual CrossFit into your training, so some rope climbs here and there, some WODs, this model could be a very viable option. Once again, as you get more niche with your training, I think that's where the Puma Fuse 2.0 will fall off, so you may want to look into other options for that context. But for somebody who wants to save a little bit of money, who likes to dabble in a little bit of everything on a weekly basis, I think the Puma Fuse 2.0 could be a good budget conscious option. So when it comes to the sizing and fit in the Puma Fuse 2.0, I think most lifters and athletes should be safe going true to size in this model. The length fits true and the width has been increased a little bit. It's a little bit more neutral than narrow compared to the Puma Fuse. So looking at the 2 and then versus the 1 over here, we do have a slightly increased forefoot and midfoot in the 2 here. So I do think it will be a little bit more inclusive for a wider range of foot anatomies. So if you have a narrow or neutral width foot, you should resonate really well with the fit of the Puma Fuse 2.0. If you have a slightly wider foot, you may be able to get away with this model, but again, if you have a very wide or flat foot, I would say pass on the Puma Fuse 2.0. Also, if you have custom orthotics or insoles, that is something to consider with the shoe too, because with this model, the responsiveness comes from this thicker insole. So if you have to remove that, it's gonna basically change the whole feel of the shoe. So that would definitely be something to consider. And if you're gonna try to stack these two on one another, so if you have a custom insole on top of this, I'm not convinced you're gonna have enough volume in this upper to make this shoe feel comfortable. So if you have custom orthotics or insoles, definitely consider that before investing in the shoe. But that being said, narrow, neutral, and slightly wider feet should be safe going true to size in the Puma Fuse 2.0. When it comes to the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in the Puma Fuse 2.0, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 13.30 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 4 millimeters, and this model once again has a removable insole. As you can see, it is this thicker foam insole here. So if you have custom orthotics or insoles, that would definitely be something to consider with the shoe, because I'm not sure it's gonna resonate with you depending on how thick your custom insoles are. All right, so now let's go over the construction of the Puma Fuse 2.0. Up here on the toe box, we have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. It is slightly biased to the medial side. And then looking at the upper construction around the toe box, we have a breathable mesh with a light synthetic overlay covering the entirety of the toe box. Honestly, this is one area that I do think could still use like a buff with its overall durability and construction. I would love to see this increase a little bit when it comes to the material and the texture that you're getting. I think it'll prolong the shoe's health. Once again, on my other model here, it already ripped up pretty much on concrete. So if you are training outdoors, definitely don't do any form of burpee or like prone to sprint where you're gonna be dragging this toe, because this synthetic layer, like other training shoes that have this, it's gonna take a beating. Looking at the midfoot of this shoe, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets that wrap up, and then we have a lightweight mesh tongue. With tongues like this, be conscious of how you're pulling it on and adjusting it. Make sure you're using 2 hands, because this tongue is pretty lightweight. I don't want you to rip it pulling or tugging on it with 1 hand, especially if the shoe's already tightened. Looking at the midfoot construction, we have a textile overlay here from the midfoot back into the heel, and then we also have an outsole wrap here on the lateral and medial side of this shoe. And this has been changed with its texture, so you get a little bit more bite for rope climbs in this model. It's still not a stellar model for rope climbs, but it definitely performs better than the original Puma Fuse, and I don't think it's gonna run into the same durability issues. Looking at the heel construction, we have a cup and counter back here that does a pretty good job at locking down the heel. I never really had heel slip issues in this shoe. Plus with that low profile upper, this model's pretty easy to get nice and tight. We have an external heel tab back here, and then we have a reworked TPU clip in the heel. Looking at the original Puma Fuse, we had like this very awkward TPU clip, and we had this like weird kind of tacky plastic thing up here on the heel. It didn't really do much, so I'm happy that Puma got rid of that and just used a singular piece of TPU down here. And then looking at the outsole construction, we have a Puma grip outsole throughout, and then we have Fuse flex grooves up here in the forefoot. It kind of helps give this toe box a lot of maneuverability, and we have a full rubber texture throughout, so I don't think you're gonna have an issue with tread whatsoever in this model. Then once again, we do have a removable insole. It's basically like this thick, quote unquote, internal midsole construction, so this is what gives you the responsiveness and comfort in this model. Once you take that out of the shoe, it's pretty much just a rubber sole that you're gonna be stepping on. So once again, for my folks who have custom insoles, that's something to consider with the shoe, because if you have a thin insole and you take this out, you're pretty much going to have just this rubber and your insole separating your foot from the floor, so it may be a little bit firm for your overall needs. Overall though, that makes up the gist of the Puma Fuse 2.0's construction. If you have additional questions on this model's construction, drop a comment down below. Alright guys, that wraps up my review of the Puma Fuse 2.0. Overall, I'm a fan of this model. I know not everybody's going to like it, but as a budget conscious option, I see this as a very viable shoe, and it's cool to see Puma do some updates to this model based on what people really didn't like in the Puma Fuse. If you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.